The Grand Hall of the Galactic Confederation headquarters stretched impossibly wide, with ceiling panels that shifted like clouds above the assembled representatives. Humans had only recently been granted membership, and Admiral Kim Tae-ho stood, straight-backed before the Council of Elders, despite the heavy gravity settings that favored the larger species. "The matter is settled," announced Elder Pole, his blue scales shimmering under the hall's soft lights. "Humans will not participate in sanctioned military conflicts between Confederation members." The Elder's four eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of finality among his kind. Admiral Kim nodded, his weathered face betraying no emotion. He was the third generation of his family to serve in Earth's space forces, and at 62, he had seen humanity claw its way to the stars through sheer determination. Now, barely 20 years after first contact, humans stood among ancient civilizations, only to be told they weren't fit for war. "We respect the Council's wisdom," Kim said, his voice carrying clearly across the chamber. "May I ask the reasoning behind this decision?" A ripple of murmurs passed through the assembly. The Doraxians to his left fluttered their breathing membranes. Hearing what humans had learned was amusement. The tall, thin Ulthian representative leaned toward her translator and whispered something that made the device emit a soft chime of laughter. Elder Pole gestured with a clawed hand. "Our observers have studied Earth's history extensively, Admiral Kim. Your species is, how shall we phrase this delicately, both remarkably destructive and particularly vulnerable." "I don't understand," Kim replied, though he understood perfectly. The Ulthian representative next till rose to her full 3-meter height. "Your bodies break easily, Admiral. No natural armor, no redundant organs, minimal resistance to radiation and toxins." She tilted her elongated head. "Yet you fight wars of extraordinary brutality. You lack the physical durability for civilized conflict." "Civilized conflict?" Kim asked. "Wars between Confederation members follow strict protocols," Elder Pole explained. "Limited engagements, predetermined battlefields, agreed-upon victory conditions. Your historical conflicts show no such restraint." A holographic display activated above the center of the hall, showing footage from Earth's military history. Trenches from the First World War, nuclear explosions, urban combat from various conflicts, soldiers fighting in mud, snow, jungle. "Your species fights until near extinction," said a Meraxian representative, their voice tinged with what might have been fear. "You employ chemical weapons against your own kind. You target civilian populations. You destroy your own environments. To gain tactical advantage." Kim watched the images without flinching. Each representative added their observations about human warfare, observations that missed the fundamental nature of how and why humans fought. "We've evolved," Kim said simply. "Earth has been at peace for 30 years. A heartbeat in cosmic time," Elder Pole replied. "This ban is for your protection, Admiral. Confederation conflicts have rules, honor. Your fragile species would be devastated." Kim noticed the subtle undercurrent in the chamber, the condescension barely hidden behind. "Concern? These ancient species, with their hardened exoskeletons and regenerative tissues, their technology honed over thousands of years, saw humans as children playing with fire." "I understand," Kim said, bowing slightly. "If we may not participate, might I request that human observers be permitted to attend these ritualized conflicts? To learn." This request seemed to please the Council. Of course, the primitive newcomers would want to watch their betters, to learn how civilized beings conducted warfare. "Granted," Elder Pole said magnanimously. "Perhaps in time, with proper guidance, humans may evolve suitable approaches to conflict resolution." The meeting adjourned, and Kim was joined by his aide, Lieutenant Han, as they walked back to the Earth Embassy. "They think we're savages," Han whispered, anger evident in her voice. "They think we're weak," Kim corrected, "both physically and technologically. They see our history of total war as evidence of both barbarism and desperation." They entered the secure chamber of the embassy, where Kim's small staff waited anxiously. The room, unlike the Grand Confederation spaces, was practical, designed for function over form. Maps and data screens covered the walls, and the light was set to Earth normal, Didier. They really ban us from their wars? Asked Major Song, disbelief in his voice. Kim removed his formal diplomatic jacket and sat heavily in his chair. They did. They believe they're protecting us. Sir, this is an insult to everything, began Colonel Park. Kim held up his hand, and the room fell silent. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Let them believe what they wish about us, he said quietly. History will be the judge. He turned to a secure terminal and pressed his palm against it. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a second set of controls. Send word to Fleet Command. Operation Quiet Watch continues as planned. Double the observation teams at all Confederation military exercises. I want analysis of every species' capabilities, weaknesses, and tactical doctrines. Yes, Admiral, his staff responded in unison. Kim looked at the star map on the wall, at the thousands of worlds now connected to humanity's fate. They've never faced an enemy that doesn't follow their rules, he said almost to himself. They've forgotten what real war is. Let's hope they never have to remember. His eyes hardened as he studied the map. But if that day comes, we'll be ready. The observation deck on Confederation Station Alpha 9 offered a perfect view of the burning world below. Commander Park Ji-eun stood with her hands clasped behind her back, her face illuminated by the orange glow of a dying planet. She was the spitting image of her grandfather, same straight posture, same calm eyes that missed nothing. They hit Proxima Centauri B this morning, said her aide, Lieutenant Cho. That's the third world in 17 days. Park nodded silently. For 50 years, humans had played by the Confederation's rules. They observed, they learned. They built their quiet strength while accepting their place as second-class members. Her grandfather hadn't lived to see this day, but he had prepared for it. The Doraxian Defense Fleet didn't even slow them down. Cho continued, scrolling through reports on his tablet. Their shields just absorbed everything, like the weapons weren't even there. The Vrexal had appeared without warning 6 weeks earlier. Strange crystalline ships emerged from the darkness beyond the galactic rim, ignoring all hails and diplomatic protocols. Their first act was to harvest an uninhabited moon for minerals. Their second was to do the same to an inhabited world, regardless of its population of 8 million. The councils called an emergency session, Cho said. All member species, even us. Park turned from the viewport. When? 2 hours. They're scared. They should be, Park replied. The council chamber was chaos. Gone was the ceremonial order that had defined galactic politics for millennia. Representatives shouted over each other in a dozen languages, while emergency translators struggled to keep up. The Vrexal ships destroyed our entire defense fleet, screamed the Ulthian ambassador, her normally composed demeanor shattered by fear. 4,000 warriors gone in minutes. Morax Prime has fallen, announced another representative, his voice hollow. The colony worlds are being evacuated, but there's not enough time. Elder Paul, now ancient even by his species standards, hammered a ceremonial staff against the floor. Order! We must have order to address this crisis. Park sat in the human section, observing. The past 5 decades had changed little in how the Confederation viewed her kind. Humans were still kept at arm's length, invited to trade but never fully trusted. The ban on human participation in military matters remained absolute. A holographic display activated in the center of the chamber, showing the path of destruction left by the Vrexal fleet. Dozens of worlds stripped of resources, billions dead or displaced. The crystalline ships followed no recognizable pattern, striking deep into Confederation territory, then retreating, only to appear elsewhere. Our analysts believe they're building something, said the Doraxian military commander, pointing to strange structures that had appeared on conquered worlds. But we cannot determine its purpose. What about negotiation? Asked a representative from a peaceful species. Have we tried to communicate? Repeatedly, Elder Paul replied. They respond to no known communication protocols. Perhaps they don't recognize our authority, suggested another. They don't recognize our existence, corrected the Doraxian. We are resources to them, nothing more. The debate continued for hours. Plans were proposed and discarded. The Confederation military, designed for ceremonial conflicts with predetermined outcomes, had no strategy for an enemy that didn't follow the rules. Finally, Elder Paul addressed the elephant in the room. The Rekesal will reach the core worlds within months. Our combined fleets have proven ineffective. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. "Does anyone have a solution to offer?" he asked, his voice cracking with age and fear. Park felt every eye in the room turn toward the human delegation. 50 years of being sidelined, and now they looked to Earth. She stood slowly, straightening her uniform. "Commander Park Ji-un of Earth," she said clearly. "I believe we may be able to help." The Ulthian representative made a dismissive gesture. "With what? Your species was banned from military participation because you lack both the physical durability and technological advancement to—" "We were banned," Park interrupted, "because you feared how we fight." She walked to the center of the chamber, accessing the holographic controls with practiced ease. The display changed to show a different map, one that the Confederation had never seen before. "For 50 years, we've respected your ban. We've watched your ceremonial wars, your ritual combat. We learned your ways." She looked around the room. "But we never stopped preparing for ours." The map showed human military installations hidden throughout Earth-controlled space, shipyards built inside hollowed-out asteroids, training grounds on harsh, uninhabitable worlds, fleet staging areas concealed within dense nebulae. "This isn't war as you know it," Park said, meeting Elder Pole's 4 eyes directly. "This is war as we know it. Total. Desperate. Without rules." Murmurs spread through the chamber. "What are you suggesting?" Elder Pole asked carefully. "Lift the ban," Park replied simply. "Let us fight." "Your ships would be destroyed just as quickly as ours," the Duraxian commander objected. Park shook her head. "You design your ships to fight each other, following Confederation rules of engagement. We designed ours to survive against unknown threats, different philosophies." She brought up images of human stealth vessels, drone swarms, and weapons that made several representatives gasp. "You've been building these secretly?" Elder Pole asked, voice trembling. "My grandfather always said, 'Hope for peace, prepare for war.' We hoped for 50 years. Now war has found us all." The council erupted again, some calling for immediate human assistance, others warning against trusting the primitive species with real military power. Elder Pole raised his hand for silence. "What exactly are you offering, Commander Park?" "A different approach. You fight with honor and ceremony. The Vrexal fight like machines, predictable and relentless." She paused. "Humans fight dirty. We adapt, we improvise, we overcome." "And what do you want in return?" asked the Ulthian, suspicious. "A full seat at the council, equal standing when this is over." Park's eyes hardened. "If we're going to bleed for the Confederation, we want to be part of it." Elder Pole looked around the chamber at representatives of species that had ruled the stars, while humans were still learning to make fire. Then he looked back at the holographic display showing another world beginning to burn. "The ban is lifted," he declared, provisionally. Park nodded, already calculating what forces could be deployed fastest. "You won't regret this, Elder." "I already do," the old alien replied quietly. "I fear we're about to learn why humans were banned from war in the first place." As Park left the chamber to contact Earth Command, she thought of her grandfather's words from half a century ago. History would indeed be the judge. The Ulthian docking master watched in stunned silence as the human vessels emerged from the nebula. Unlike the gleaming uniform ships of the Confederation fleet, each human craft looked different. Some cobbled together with visible modifications, others sleek and black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. They moved in no recognizable formation. "These are your warships?" he asked Commander Park, unable to hide his dismay. "No," Park replied, eyes fixed on the tactical display. "These are just the advanced scouts." Within 6 hours, the staging area at Ulthian Prime was filled with more human ships than the docking master had ever seen in one place. A chaotic collection that made no sense to Confederation military doctrine. Massive carriers disgorged swarms of one-person fighters. Bulky armored troop transports settled alongside needle-thin stealth vessels. Engineering ships dragged asteroids into defensive positions. In the command center, Park briefed the combined Confederation leadership. The room felt too small for so many species, the air thick with fear and desperate hope. "We've studied the Vrexel attack patterns," she explained, gesturing to data points on the main display. "They operate on perfect, predictable logic. When they meet resistance, they apply overwhelming force in textbook maneuvers. That's why our defenses fail," agreed the Duraxian commander. "They simply calculate the necessary force and apply it." Park nodded. "Exactly. So we won't fight like you." She tapped her command pad, and the display changed to show a sprawling battle plan that made several alien officers physically recoil. "You can't be serious," the Ulthian admiral said. "This violates every principle of civilized warfare." "That's the point," said Captain Lee, Park's second-in-command. "The Vrexal expect civilization. We'll give them chaos." The first engagement came 3 days later at Morak Secondary, a manufacturing hub already partially harvested by the Vrexal. The crystalline ships arrived in their usual perfect formation, sensors scanning for the expected Confederation response, a defensive line, ships arranged by class and firepower. Instead, they found apparently empty space. Hidden beneath sensor-absorbing shields, 200 human mining ships had spent 48 hours seeding the approach vector with millions of micro-explosive devices, not powerful enough to damage Vrexal ships, but perfect for creating sensor ghosts. When the explosives detonated in sequence, the Vrexal formation faltered for the first time as their navigation systems struggled to separate real threats from false positives. That 3-second hesitation was all the hidden human attack craft needed. They struck from multiple vectors, weapons targeting propulsion and communication arrays rather than the impenetrable Vrexal shields. They didn't fight to destroy, they fought to confuse, to separate, to isolate. "Transmit the noise pattern," Park ordered from the command ship. "What?" Followed shocked the Confederation observers nearly as much as it shocked the Vrexal. Human communication ships broadcast a carefully designed signal, a chaotic, ever-changing burst that mimicked the crystalline syntax of Vrexal communications, but carried no actual information, just noise injected directly into their command network. The Vrexal ships began to move erratically. "They're a hive mind," Park explained to the Ulthian admiral watching beside her. "They've never experienced communication interference before. Their thoughts are fragmenting." On the tactical display, human ships darted between the larger Vrexal vessels, never staying still, never presenting a pattern that could be predicted. Some fired conventional weapons, others deployed clouds of nanoscale particles that adhered to Vrexal sensors. Still others seemed to do nothing at all, until Vrexal ships suddenly lost power or spun out of control. Is this how humans always fight?" the Ulthian asked quietly. "This is how we fight when we're outmatched," Lee replied. "We find the weakness and exploit it ruthlessly." By the end of the battle, 17 human ships had been destroyed and dozens more damaged. But for the first time since their arrival, Vrexal ships retreated, not in an orderly withdrawal but in genuine disarray. Word spread quickly through the Confederation. Humans had done the impossible. They'd driven back the Vrexal. What followed was a rapid deployment of human forces throughout Confederation space. Not as a unified fleet, but as small adaptable strike teams teaching local forces new tactics. On Duraxia, human engineers helped modify traditional energy weapons to fire in unpredictable patterns. On the oceanic worlds of the Mer Collective, human submarine tactics were adapted for the giant city ships that plied the global seas. Even the peaceful gardeners of Thule learned from human scientists how to make their plant-based biotechnology disruptive to Vrexal sensors. But it was on. The mining colony of Ceres, deep that the true nature of human warfare revealed itself to the Confederation. The Vrexal had adapted quickly, developing countermeasures to the initial tactics. They arrived at Ceres Deep with new defense systems designed to neutralize the human approach. Within hours, they had destroyed the defensive line and landed harvester units on the surface. The Confederation commanders prepared to retreat, to sacrifice another world. "No," said Lieutenant Kang, the ranking human officer. "We still have options." "Your ships can't penetrate their new defenses," the Duraxian pointed out, "and they've neutralized the communication disruption." "Then we don't use ships," Kang replied simply. What followed haunted the Confederation observers for years afterward. Human mining teams, armed with nothing but industrial equipment and explosive charges, launched a ground assault on the Rexall harvesters. They didn't fight from a distance. They closed to point-blank range, sacrificing dozens to place charges on critical joints and systems. When Rexall reinforcements landed, the humans detonated the main power core of the mining colony itself, a suicidal tactic that annihilated the Rexall landing zone and created a molten crater visible from orbit. Only then did the human ships strike, targeting the exact frequencies where the Rexall shields were weakened from managing the ground explosion. Of the 80 humans who had implemented Kang's plan, only 7 survived. But the Rexall fleet was decimated, and Ceres Deep remained free. In the aftermath, Commander Park stood before the Council again. The chamber was subdued, the representatives processing what they had witnessed. "Your people sacrificed themselves deliberately," Elder Pole said, his voice carrying both awe and horror. "The miners of Ceres Deep, they knew they wouldn't survive." "They volunteered," Park replied simply. "Like I said, this is war as we know it, not about honor or rules, about winning, no matter the cost." "And what happens when the Rexall adapt again?" asked the Ulthian representative. Park's face hardened. "Then we change the game entirely. My engineers have been studying the Rexall crystalline structure. We believe we've found their central weakness, but exploiting it will require tactics that—" She paused. "That your people might find difficult to accept." "What do you mean?" Elder Pole asked. "Your civilizations have evolved beyond certain kinds of warfare. We understand why. But sometimes to defeat a monster, you must become one." The Ulthian finished quietly. Park nodded. "The Rexall adapt to patterns, so we'll show them something they've never seen before." Her eyes swept the chamber. "But I need your authorization to proceed without restriction. No more oversight committees, no more approval processes." The council chamber fell silent as the representatives faced their choice. Trust these unpredictable humans completely, or watch their civilization fall. Elder Pole looked at the battle footage one more time, the chaos, the sacrifice, the unexpected victories, and realized they had never really understood humans at all. "Proceed, Commander Park," he said quietly. "May whatever gods exist have mercy on us all." The Thulaxian observation ship hung back from the battle, its organic hull pulsing with the life signs of the elders within. They had come to witness, not to fight. For 10,000 years, the Thulaxians had been the historians of the Confederation, recording the rise and fall of civilizations, the ceremonial wars, the peaceful transitions of power. Nothing in their vast archives had prepared them for this. "They're deploying the resonance weapon," whispered Elder June, his tendrils curling in anxiety as he watched the human fleet maneuver around the massive Rexall mothership. The weapon had been developed in just 6 weeks, and impossibly short time by Confederation standards. Human scientists had discovered that the crystalline structure of the Rexall responded catastrophically to certain sonic frequencies. What had begun as a theory was now the centerpiece of humanity's counteroffensive. On the main tactical display, human ships moved in formations that seemed random but were precisely calculated. Each vessel carried a piece of the resonance array, none powerful enough to affect the Rexall alone, but together they created a web of destructive harmonics. "Observe how they protect their weapon ships," noted another Thulaxian elder. "The smaller vessels deliberately draw fire." It was true. The human fleet contained ships whose sole purpose was to be targeted, to absorb damage that might otherwise hit the resonance carriers. Their crews knew their mission was likely one way. When the weapon activated, the result was both beautiful and horrifying. The Rexall mothership, a construct larger than many moons, began to shimmer from within. Fracture lines appeared along its crystalline surface, spreading like cracks in ice. Light poured from these wounds, building to an unbearable brightness. Then, silence. The mothership shattered into billions of fragments, a new asteroid field born in moments. The observation deck erupted in cheers, a rare breach of Thulaxian protocol. 6 months of desperate defense had finally yielded a significant victory. The tide was turning. But the human commander's face on the communication screen showed no joy. "The Vrexal will adapt," Commander Park said flatly. "They always do. We've bought time, nothing more." She was right. Within weeks, the Vrexal deployed new ships with modified crystalline structures, immune to the resonance weapon. They struck back with increased ferocity, targeting human forces specifically. In the command center on New Terra, the largest human colony outside the solar system, Park studied the latest intelligence. Behind her, representatives from 7 Confederation species waited anxiously. The room was utilitarian by Confederation standards. Functional lighting, plain walls, chairs designed for efficiency rather than comfort. "They're learning," she said, pointing to the Vrexal movement patterns. "See how they no longer maintain rigid formations. They've incorporated randomness into their approach. They're mimicking us." Lieutenant Cho nodded grimly. "And they've established their largest staging ground yet on HD 85512B. He zoomed in on a once beautiful garden world now crawling with Vrexal structures. "Our projections show they'll launch a coordinated attack on the core systems within 15 days. "How many planets?" asked the Althean representative. 27. Population approximately 68 billion. The room fell silent as the number sank in. Even with all of humanity's unconventional tactics, there was no way to defend so many worlds simultaneously. "There must be another option," said the Doraxian commander. Park was silent for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the display. Then she looked up, her face set in stone. "There is one," she said quietly. "But I need the room cleared. Confederation observers only." Her staff filed out, casting curious glances back at their commander. When only the alien representatives remained, Park activated a secure protocol on the main display. "What I'm about to propose violates everything the Confederation stands for," she began. "If there were any other way—" She took a deep breath. "HD 85502B must be destroyed completely, along with everything on it." "Destroyed?" The Maraxian representative's voice rose in shock. "That's the only way," Park finished. "Their staging ground contains 90% of their new fleet. If we destroy it, we set them back by months, possibly years. But the planet has a population of—" The Althean checked her datapad. 3 million humans. Your people. I know." Park's voice was steady, but her hands gripped the edge of the display table until her knuckles turned white. "The evacuation ships can only take about 30% before the Vrexal notice and respond. The rest will have to remain." The room erupted in protests. Planet-killing weapons had been banned in the Confederation for millennia. The very suggestion was taboo. "You would sacrifice your own people?" The Doraxian was aghast. "To save 68 billion others?" "Yes." Park looked each representative in the eye. "This is what you never understood about us. This is why you feared human warfare even when you thought us weak. We will do whatever it takes to survive, whatever it costs." "The Council will never approve this," the Althean warned. "I'm not asking for approval. I'm informing you of my decision." Park's voice hardened. "My grandfather accepted your ban 50 years ago because he knew someday you might need what you feared. That day has come." 3 days later, the observation ships of multiple species gathered at a safe distance to witness something none had seen in living memory. The human evacuation fleet was still departing, thousands of small ships packed beyond capacity. When the human destroyers moved into position, the weapon they deployed was deceptively small. Not a planet killer in the traditional sense, but something far more insidious. It burrowed into the planet's crust and destabilized the core itself. HD 85552B died slowly, over hours. Its surface bulged and cracked as the mantle liquefied. Massive earthquakes tore apart continents. The atmosphere itself began to burn. On the Thulaxian observation ship, Elder June watched in horrified fascination. The sensors detected the deaths, Vrexor, by the hundreds of thousands as their ships and structures were consumed. And humans, nearly 2 million humans who had not escaped in time. The long-range cameras showed Commander Park on her bridge, watching the destruction without expression. But when the final readings confirmed the planet's death, a single tear tracked down her face. quickly wiped away as she turned to her crew. "Set course for the Vega system," she ordered. "The Rexall will regroup there first." The Confederation representatives were silent, processing what they had witnessed. It was the Thulaxian elder who finally spoke, his ancient voice trembling. "I understand now," he said. "All these millennia, we thought we were protecting you from war." He gestured at the debris field that had once been a living world. "Now I realize we were protecting war from you." The news spread throughout the Confederation with the speed of quantum communications. A human commander had destroyed her own colony world to defeat the enemy. The debate raged across 1,000 planets. Was this an atrocity or salvation? But the strategic impact was undeniable. The Rexall offensive collapsed without their main staging area. For the first time, they retreated across multiple fronts, abandoning conquered territories. In the council chamber, no one spoke of rules or ceremonies anymore. The representatives watched in grim silence as reports came in of human forces driving the Rexall back, system by system. "They fight as if possessed," murmured a Maraxian observer. "No hesitation, no restraint." "They fight as if the alternative is extinction," corrected Elder Pole, "because for them, it always has been." On the tactical displays throughout Confederation space, the Rexall territory shrank steadily under the human onslaught. New weapons, new tactics, new levels of sacrifice. The patterns shifted constantly, never giving the crystalline minds time to adapt. And on 1,000 worlds, the people of the Confederation began to understand why humans had been banned from their ceremonial wars. Not because humans were too weak or primitive, but because once unleashed they were terrifying. The Grand Hall of Reconciliation gleamed under the light of 3 suns. Built on a previously uninhabited world at the exact center of Confederation space, the structure incorporated architectural elements from all member species, the flowing organic curves favored by Thulaxians, the precise geometric patterns of Ulthian design, the light-capturing crystals of Doraxian tradition, and now the practical durability of human engineering. Commander Lee Sun-Woo stood at the massive window overlooking the valley below, where the Victory Monument was nearing completion. Unlike his predecessor, Commander Park, who had returned to Earth after the final Rexall retreat, Lee had agreed to serve as humanity's representative during this sensitive transition period. "They're calling it the Pax Humana," said his aide, Lieutenant Yoon, joining him at the window. "Not sure if that's a compliment." Lee smiled slightly. "Probably not, but it's accurate enough." The war had ended 6 months earlier, with the Rexall's final defeat at the Battle of Proxima Centauri, the same system where they had first announced their presence by destroying a Confederation world. The surviving Rexall ships had fled beyond the Galactic Rim, pursued by automated human drones programmed to ensure they never returned. In the aftermath, the Confederation faced an uncomfortable new reality. Their centuries of ceremonial warfare had left them unprepared for a real enemy. Only the humans, the primitive newcomers they had dismissed, had saved them from extinction. "The council session begins in 30 minutes, Yoon reminded him. "They're voting on the final wording of the new charter today." Lee nodded, straightening his dress uniform. "Any last-minute opposition?" "The usual. Some of the older species are still uncomfortable with the implications." "They'll adapt," Lee said, "or they'll be replaced by species that will. Evolution." In action, he thought, but didn't say aloud. The Rexall had changed everything. The council chamber was filled beyond capacity. Representatives from all 217 Confederation species had gathered for this historic moment. The traditional seating arrangement had been abandoned, another small but significant change. Now members sat in a true circle, with no position elevated above others. Elder Pole, who had supervised the original ban on human military participation 50 years earlier, now stood at the center of the chamber. Age had bent his once proud frame, but his 4 eyes were clear as he addressed the assembly. "The document before you represents a new understanding between all peoples of the Confederation," he began. "For too long we existed in a state of comfortable stagnation, believing our ceremonial conflicts represented the pinnacle of civilized interaction." Murmurs of agreement and discomfort rippled through the chamber. The Rexall showed us the cost. Of such complacency, he continued, and humanity showed us another path. The main display activated, showing the text of the new Confederation Charter. Most of it maintained the principles of the original: free trade, cultural exchange, mutual defense. But Section 47 was entirely new, highlighted in pulsing blue. The human contingency, Elder Pole read aloud. In recognition of their unique approach to warfare and conflict resolution, human military forces are hereby designated as the Confederation's final option in cases of existential threat. Humans will not participate in traditional conflicts between member species, but will maintain independent military readiness for deployment in emergencies as determined by unanimous council vote. Lee watched the faces of the representatives as they absorbed the implications. Most showed relief. Some displayed lingering unease. The Althian representative in particular shifted uncomfortably in her seat. This amendment acknowledges two truths, Elder Pole continued. First, that the traditional ways of the Confederation remain valuable for resolving disputes between members. And second, that there exist threats against which only humanity's or particular talents offer protection. When the vote came, it was nearly unanimous, with only 3 species abstaining and none opposing. The new charter was approved and, with it, humanity's unique position in galactic society. As the formal session concluded, representatives broke into smaller groups for the traditional post-vote discussions. Lee found himself approached by a young Thulaxian diplomat, barely a century old by his species standards, practically a child. "Commander Lee," the young diplomat said, his tendrils curling in the Thulaxian gesture of respect. "I have studied the Rexall conflict extensively, but something still confuses me." "What's that?" Lee asked. "Why do humans fight so differently than other species? Even the most aggressive Confederation members follow certain principles in warfare, codes of conduct, rules of engagement." The Thulaxian's large eyes blinked slowly. "But humans, the tactics you employed against the Vrexel violated every established norm. The resonance weapon, the sacrifice of your own colony, the pursuit drone's program never to stop hunting." "Why?" Lee considered his answer carefully. Around them, the representatives of 100 worlds continued their discussions, rebuilding the galaxy in the war's aftermath. Many still watched. Humans with a mixture of gratitude and fear, the saviors they weren't quite comfortable with. "Because we never confused war with honor," Lee finally said. "That's the fundamental difference. For most Confederation species, warfare evolved into a kind of ritual, a way to resolve disputes while minimizing actual destruction. It became about demonstrating superiority rather than survival." He gestured to the star map showing former Vrexel territory. "But on Earth, war has always been about survival. Nothing more, nothing less. We don't fight to win battles. We fight to end wars." The young Thulaxian absorbed this. "But the cost is always too high," Lee finished. "That's why we're willing to pay any price to make sure it ends quickly. Because we've learned through thousands of years of bloodshed that the longer a war continues, the more is lost. Not just lives, but humanity itself." Beyond the windows of the Grand Hall, ships from 100 worlds moved in careful, orderly patterns. Trade vessels, diplomatic shuttles, the occasional ceremonial military craft. And among them, nearly invisible, unless you knew where to look, small human ships patrolled the approaches to the Council world. "Your people fear us now," Lee observed quietly. "Yes," the Thulaxian admitted. "But we also understand you better. The original ban, it was never about protecting humans from Confederation warfare." "No," Lee agreed. "It was about protecting the comfortable illusion that war could be civilized, that it could have rules everyone would follow." He smiled slightly. "Reality is Messier." As the young diplomat departed, Lee turned back to the window. The monument in the valley below caught the light of the setting suns, a simple obelisk inscribed with the names of worlds both saved and sacrificed. Humanity had found its place in the stars at last, not as conquerors or victims, but as guardians of last resort. The species that remembered what real war cost and what it sometimes required. The galaxy would know peace now, even if it was a peace built on the understanding that some lines should never be crossed. Because if they were, if another threat, Like the Vrexal emerged from the darkness between stars, the humans would be waiting, and this time no one would hold them back.